So the next bill on the agenda today is the Cannabis Bill, House File 100. So Representative Stevenson, welcome to the committee. As you make your way up, I will move that House File 100 be placed on the general register.
Just let it flow.
And I also know we have two amendments, your author's amendment and the grant review. So we'll take those up before we get to the bill description. So I will move the A90 amendment. Any discussion to the A90 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Motion prevails and the A90 is adopted. I will also move the A89 amendment, which is the grant review language you've been adopting on all budget bills. Any discussion to that? Seeing none, all those in favor of the A89, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails and the A89 is adopted. So to your bill as amended, Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. House File 100 is the cannabis legalization bill. I think probably every member on the committee has seen this bill somewhere else before, as this is our 15th committee stop, but I'm very happy to be saving the best for last, Madam Chair, and to be here in Ways and Means. We did just adopt, thank you, the A90 amendment, which put in the appropriations in the bill, and with that, the tracking sheet that I understand is distributed is a good summary of the fiscal impact of the bill. Just for members' interest, I'll note two of the appropriations that people have been paying close attention to that I had been promising would be coming eventually once we had a fiscal note. They are now in the bill, including the grants to local public health and the drug recognition experts training that I know several members have been particularly interested in. Those are funded at the request levels, including also funding for the Poison Control Center and the grant funding in the bill that has been anticipated. The bill has a net cost to the general fund in the first biennium, $76 million, and a net savings to the general fund of $17 million in the second biennium. This is largely due to the fact that while we have costs starting up right away from setting up the agency and doing the expungement work, so on and so forth, tax revenue generated from cannabis sales doesn't begin right at the beginning, because obviously it takes some time to set up the agency, do the rulemaking, do the licensing, get the businesses up and running. So there's a bit of a lag there, but you can see that over the long run, the bill is more than self-supporting. With that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer questions.
Discussion to the bill. Representative Nash.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and to the author. I think this is the second or third time I've heard the bill, and there are some questions that I've had regarding local control, and particularly for the committee that we're in right now. If I'm reading the A90 correctly, and we didn't have a whole lot of chance to talk about the A90 before we adopted it, but you're not allowing local entities, municipalities, or otherwise to tax for this locally, is that correct?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Nash, yes, that's correct.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the author, can you maybe help me understand that? Because as you and I talked about in state government finance, they're going to have a lot of things that they have to deal with locally. So I'm just going to put on the former mayor of Waconia's hat, and if this happens, they're not going to be able to tax for it, and yet they have to do some of the regulatory work that's going to happen locally, licensing provisions and things like that they have to follow up on. Why is it that you've chosen to not allow them to tax locally?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Nash, to begin with, it's important to know that while we don't allow them to tax, that's not to say that there's no funding for local government in the bill. You mentioned one right off the bat, which is that there are some regulatory and licensing features that local governments are able to do, and they're able to charge licensing fees, and those fees are significant for larger retail operations. And that should fund the cost of what they are asked to do under the bill, ensuring that the products sold in those retail establishments are legal under the bill and that sales aren't occurring to minors. In addition, there are some grant programs and other appropriations in the bill. I just mentioned one a second ago, which is grants to local public health, which are $10 million on an annual basis, $9 million to local governments, $1 million to tribal governments. So there is funding for local governments in the bill. The reason why, however, we chose not to allow local governments to tax directly, and it's consistent with other decisions related to local government in the bill that we've discussed in prior committees, is that one of the principal aims of this legislation is to curb the illicit market, replace an illicit marketplace with a legitimate marketplace. And what we have seen in other states that have legalized cannabis is if they've given local governments the ability to tax, it increases the cost of legal cannabis to the point that illicit market cannabis continues to thrive and even, in some cases, really prosper. California is the best example of this, where local governments have the ability to institute very significant taxation, and it's led to a significant gap between the cost of legal cannabis and illicit market cannabis.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, we'll disagree to a point on that. A good friend of mine from high school I used to play football with is the police chief of a city in Colorado. And he said that the illicit market just reacts from market forces and lowers the price of their product. So I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with that. But, one of the problems I still have with the bill is that the lack of local control. And you and I, we spent a few minutes in Chair Cleavorn's committee hammering through this. The fact that we're effectively telling cities that you can't tax this and that you also can't say no, I still find that quite problematic, because we have had mechanisms for cities by referenda to vote themselves as a dry city, and we had that amendment in state government finance, and we'll have it again for you on the floor. This just seems very, very heavy-handed, both from the imposition or the lack of the ability to impose a local tax, but also from not the law enforcement, but some of the code enforcements. I just find this very, very troubling. And I guess I had a question you just said regarding the local fees. Where is that in your A90 or in the main body of the bill?
Representative Stevenson.
Okay. It's not in the A90. Madam Chair, Representative Nash, it's not in the A90. And I'm going to see if Ben Johnson, he's looking too.
Nonpartisan staff coming up to the table, so welcome to the
Is
committee.
it in the, oh,
Please.
it's right here in the,
Continue, Representative Stevenson. Otherwise, I can go to nonpartisan staff there too.
yeah, okay. Madam Chair, Representative Nash, so Section 11 of Article 1, beginning on page 34, lays out the fee schedule in the bill. And then in paragraph A, it discusses how the local unit of government is able to charge Section 22 of Article 1, Subdivision 2 on page 52.15.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just because I'm still flipping to that in the very large bill, what is that fee that they're able to impose locally?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Nash, it is a percentage of the fee that the state's able to charge. So basically, whatever the state licensing fee is, the local unit of government's able to charge 50% of that fee. It depends on the size of the business.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm glad that we finally have a fiscal note, and I think we are the first committee to have the fiscal note, if I'm not incorrect.
Representative Stevenson.
It was in, Madam Chair, Representative Nash, the fiscal note was available in the taxes committee as well.
Well, it's no surprise that I'll be voting no on this. We use the term "not ready for prime time" a lot. I think that I'll use it again, but it just seems very troubling that many of the things that we've been talking about and with both you and in general are still not close to reality. So I'll just be voting no. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the author. Can you tell me what the overall benefit to society and the community is for this particular bill?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Petersburg, that's a big question. There's a lot of benefit from doing this. To begin with, the policy that we currently have with regard to cannabis is not achieving any of its aims and comes at a great cost to our society. So in other words, our current laws are doing more harm than good. Cannabis laws disproportionately impact communities of color with achieving very little in the way of public safety benefit. I speak from experience. As you might know, I'm a prosecutor in my day job, and I think we allocate far too many resources to cannabis at the expense of more serious crime. Minnesotans want this change. They're ready for it. There's a lot of responsible usage that can happen for cannabis by way of pain mitigation and treatment. And I think that's demonstrated by the fact that in every single state that has legalized adult use cannabis or medical cannabis in the country, we've seen a drop in opioid overdose deaths. They're from veterans who can't access cannabis through the federal VA, even with our medical program in Minnesota, to the disparate impacts on communities of color in our correction system, to the opportunities for economic engagement. I think there's a number of benefits to this bill, which is probably why the majority of Minnesotans in every single survey that I've ever seen support legalization.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, but, you know, it seems like that argument is true for almost all of our illegal drugs. I mean, the cost of enforcing and whatever is extremely high, prosecution, et cetera. But we're making a decision based upon cannabis and marijuana. And I understand that a lot of people want it. That doesn't necessarily reflect the need or the benefit to the community. Just because we want it doesn't necessarily mean it's good for us. I want lots of sugar, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's good for me. So I'm just kind of curious, if that's not true for all illegal drugs that we use, why is this one different than any of the others?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Petersburg, I think that the quantifiable harm to society between cannabis and other illicit substances is easily measured. I think that the comparison falls apart pretty quickly. I think that cannabis, in terms of societal impact, is not nearly as significant as alcohol, a legal substance in the state of Minnesota. And, you know, I don't think anyone's proposing to outlaw your sugar either, so I think you can rest at ease.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you. I would just say, you know, I think the jury is still out on whether or not it's going to have an impact in society or not, and we'll see. I have lots of relatives in other states that have cannabis use, and there are a lot more concerns and a lot more anecdotal, certainly information in regards to that. So I think it's just dangerous at this time, but I can't support the bill either. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair. For the author, see, we've got 9.5 million in the first biennium, and 26, 27, another 9.3 million for the Cannabis Expungement Board. Do you not see a need for that to go down over the next biennium?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Novotny, the costs in the Cannabis Expungement Board are spread out over the 5 years. I assume that the board is operational from this summer through 28. And they have a lot of work to do. In the fiscal note, it talks about how there are, and I'd have to go get the exact number, I don't have it on my fingertips, but the thousands upon thousands of convictions that they will be reviewing and potentially taking action on, sorting through. It's a big job because the legacy of the current prohibition regime is immense and spans decades. So we're asking the board to take on a big job, and it's not surprising it will take them significant resources and significant time to do it.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair. Representative Stevenson, so my question is this. We're spending over $18 million on this board to do all this expungement. I assume at some point in your prosecuting career, you started out on misdemeanors, petty misdemeanors. Did you ever do a speed trial? And I'll just get into the question because I have a commercial driver's license, and therefore a speeding ticket on my driving license, speaking from experience, lasts a long time. It stays in there a long time. One of my speeding tickets was in a place where they had posted the speed limit at 55, and that current speed limit in that same location is now 70. Should I have that speeding ticket taken off my driving record because the zone posted speed limit changed?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Novotny, I think you have something that you should be taken up with, maybe additional legislation in the future. And I actually think, I don't know for a fact, 'cause it's not my bill, but I think that Representative Long's Clean Slate Act might be here to help you out with that, in particular in the public safety bill.
Representative Novotny.
My point is thank you, Chair. My point is you do actions based on the laws that exist at the time, and they're illegal or not illegal, and we're spending $18 million to change the past and erase convictions. How many of these convictions, as you know, were a plea down an agreement for other things, and we're just going to wipe those all out now? I see that you added a substantial amount of money for the drug recognition evaluators, the DRE training. I appreciate that. And I think it's a recognition of what we're going to have. Last week in transportation, we had the chair of transportation mention that increased deaths and increased injury accidents are a justification for changing a lot of things, and we should all have the goal of reducing traffic deaths and injuries. Do you see an increase in deaths and injuries coming after this bill is passed?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Novotny, I think the data, I'm a guy who likes to look at evidence and data, and I think the evidence and data from other states is mixed, and it depends on the study and the methodology of the study. As we discussed in the Public Safety Committee and also in the Transportation Committee, one of the challenges on data for cannabis is that it remains in your stream, you're detectable in your body long after you are impaired. And so some data does show increases in traffic crashes and fatalities after legalization for the amount for people who had cannabis in their system, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they were impaired at the time of the incident, because you could become intoxicated on cannabis on a Friday night, be in an accident later in the weekend, many hours after you were no longer impaired, and it would still be detectable days after it's impaired, and it would still be detectable in your bloodstream. Other studies that have tried to control for that particular phenomena have found negligible increases in accidents and fatalities. I also think that in our bill, we do a lot to try and address this issue, starting right away this summer with the oral fluid project, but you mentioned the drug recognition experts, the education, the treatment. There's a lot of things in the bill trying to get at this problem.
Representative Novotny.
And last area I'd just like to address, you've got 8.3 million over 24-25 for different things to help out the Department of Public Safety, including replacing the drug canines, providing accident reconstructions, identifying investigations, and the last part of it is, and sealing expunged records. Starts out, that sounds like a lot of money, but then we've got all these different ways that the money's going to be pulled apart. How much do you see, and I looked through, I couldn't find it, maybe there is a breakdown, how much of the 8.3 million over 2 years is set aside for the sealing of expunged records?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Novotny, I do think that there was at least a statement in here about how that breaks down. One moment. I also think, just while I'm looking, I think that you have understated the amount that goes to DPS. On my tracking sheet, it's significantly larger than that, than the 8.3 million that you indicate in the biennium.
Taking these numbers off the A90.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair. I'm taking these numbers off the A90 line 1824 through 1829. And as long as you're looking, and this will be my...
Representative Novotny, I'll just so folks also see, I just want to point out to your point, Representative Novotny, There is the fiscal tracking sheet that goes along with it that has a little bit more to that picture than just what's in that A90 amendment. But continue on, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair. The last part of the thing, and I promise I will be done after this. This is money just to the DPS to take care of sealing these expunged records. Every law enforcement agency, from what I understand, that has these records out in the state is also going to be going and spending a lot of time and money expunging their records and doing all that. Is there any money available to help with the extra work that's going to be done on the local level? I see, as usual, we're taking care of the state, but is there anything going to the local expungement cost?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Novotny. So first, on the to go back, I did look at this further while we're talking here. So while we're looking at lines 26, 27, 28 on the fiscal tracking spreadsheet, you can see the amount in the first biennium that goes to the Department of Public Safety is more on the order of 30 million. In the fiscal note on page 127, it says that the annual cost of manually sealing expungements is approximately 874,000, so a little less than 2 million over the course of the biennium out of a $30 million appropriation is going to manual or to the expungements, at least based on that data point. And I'm happy to look at that more completely. I don't believe that there is a direct appropriation to local units of government for expungements under the bill.
Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Chair.
Anything further?
No, ma'am.
Sorry,
Thank you.
can't see you exactly, so there we go. All right. Were you trying to get on the list, Representative Farr? No.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay, Representative Farr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Representative Stevenson, you mentioned the many stops that this bill had, most of which without a fiscal note or a complete fiscal note, and I'm concerned with still what we have today. So, first question, like page 68 references in the fiscal note now a blank appropriation to MDH. I just the hair stands up in the back of my neck when I see a blank appropriation on a fiscal note. So can you explain that one?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Farr, if you could point me to where in the fiscal note you're looking, I have page 68 in front of me. I will just note there is no blank appropriation in the bill. So I might be able to offer more context if you can help me
Yeah,
out.
the bottom of the bill description, there in the middle.
Oh,
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Farr, this predates the A90 amendment. That's why it says it's a blank appropriation. So the A90 amendment would include the appropriation to the Department of Health.
Page 15.
Page 15? Thank you. Page 15 of the A90 amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Or
Representative Farr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, I see then, and I'm looking at the fiscal note now, so I may be making the same mistake again, but MMB asserts that the fiscal impact of this bill is really hard to quantify. In here, as well, 108 now, and again, I'm looking at the current fiscal note, but, the potential cost to government unknown until an evaluation of the impacts of rulemaking is complete. PCA saying that, and so just concerned that we still don't have a solid fiscal note here and don't understand the impacts of the bill entirely. And so would like to, I guess I'll echo the not ready for prime time concerns.
Representative Joachim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to thank Representative Stevenson and those that came before you for all your work on this bill. 16 committee stops, 9 engrossments show that you were working with folks all along to amend the bill. It is really a thorough look at creating a comprehensive and fair business model, because that's what we're starting as a new business in the state of Minnesota. And I always appreciate it when we Minnesotaize things before something happens at the federal level. And just want to thank you for all the work and thank nonpartisan staff, because I really lean on your House research summaries, especially for cross-reference to find things in the bill. And you are on your 9th engrossment of the House Research Summary as well. And all the work that was done in the very comprehensive fiscal note. I have to admit, I only read the section for the Department of Education because it's kind of a long fiscal note. But I just wanted to go back to touch base on the local control. I sat on a city council for 9 years too. So local control is really important to me as well. And on Article 1, Section 13, it talks about the local control that you have in this bill for cities, just like our other uses around alcohol, that the 1,000 feet prohibition for a business from schools, daycare, public parks, playgrounds. I'm really happy that you wrote athletic fields because a lot of those are not attached to a school. But also the other attractions regularly used by minors really does say a lot to what the local control can be, to where this can be sold and where it can be used. And the ability to develop model policies, standardized forms, and also to have the interim ordinances. That's important. I have to admit, I was not a fan to start with. I have evolved over time as I've seen the work on this bill evolve over time. And I just want to thank you and thank you for the work you've done and others that have done on this bill. So, thanks.
Thank you, Representative Joachim. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to speak real briefly to the local control issue, and I know it's been talked about by Representatives Nash and Joachim, but my concern is that if the locals can't raise some revenue from this, that it's going to be taking to the local taxpayers, because the locals are the ones that are going to have to bear the brunt of any fallout from law enforcement and other negative impacts on the community from this. And so all of the state agencies are getting well-fed in this bill. The Department of Health, it was just pointed out, is getting, where did it go here? 9.6 million in 24 and 18.1 in 25. So all the state agencies, if you look at the bill and the fiscal note and the A90, are being well funded, but the locals are left holding the bag. I want to pivot for a second to the courts. And Representative Stevenson, will the district courts have any role in the whole expungement issue? Will that fall back on the district courts? And what role, if any, would they have in that?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Scott, in order to complete the process of expungement, a district court needs to seal the records and issue an order.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So because of that, are there funds allocated to the district courts or to the courts to take care of that?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Scott, I do see a cost of $1 million on the fiscal tracking sheet. The Supreme Court did submit a fiscal note on this, and they do discuss how they got to that $1 million number on the very last page of the fiscal note.
Representative Scott.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Representative Stevenson. And I'm looking at that last page too, and one of the questions that the court has says it's unclear. This is the first full paragraph of page 147. It is unclear which agency is providing administrative support for the work of the Cannabis Expungement Board. Can you answer that question here in committee? Since it seemed to be an unanswered question at the time of the fiscal note.
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Scott, as I am recalling the expungement board, it is consisting of designees for multiple agencies, including a commissioner appointed by the governor, and I believe there's some thought that the commissioner appointed by the governor, it's that agency that might provide some support in getting it up and running, but that it intends to be a sort of a stand-alone entity that is able to do its own work. But I think that we're anticipating that, whatever commissioner gets appointed to the board might convene it and get it up and running. But there are appropriations in the bill to the board itself.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there someone from House Fiscal Staff that could maybe elaborate on that point in the bill to where that assumption that Representative Stevenson is making is?
Sure. I can go to Miss Adrian's.
Madam Chair and members, I was looking at the fiscal note like Representative Stevenson and the assumptions in there, and I don't know where in the bill that is. Give us 1 second.
We can. Representative Scott, did you have any other questions while we look into this, or do you want to?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure,
Why don't we do that, and we
I-
can give folks time to kind of look through and do that while you make
Right.
further comment. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Stevenson, there are a number of opponents to this bill. The local units of government, the League of Minnesota Cities, Catholic Conference, Chamber of Commerce, the Trucking Association, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, many entities that are opposed to this bill. And what conversations have you had with them to address their concerns?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Scott, the answer to your question is countless conversations with, I think, every entity you just listed, and that there are many subtle changes that have happened to the bill to try and meet reasonable concerns where they exist. And, we keep talking about the local control. It's worth noting that at the outset of this bill, there was no real contemplated role for local governments in the regulation of the cannabis markets. So we added a licensing provision into the bill that allows local units of government, or requires, cannabis retail businesses to obtain a license from their local unit of government. And then we also added the licensing fees that we discussed earlier to support those operations in order to allow local units of governments to, for example, make sure that the businesses in their locality are selling products that are legal and aren't selling to minors. And so, with any of those groups, there have been extensive conversations and ultimately, in some cases, changes to the bill. I think, as Chair Youakim pointed out, what's before the committee is the 9th engrossment. It'll be the 10th engrossment because you've adopted 2 amendments today. That actually understates it, because there were many times where we went through a committee and said, I'm not going to take that amendment here, but I'll roll it into my author's amendment in the next committee in order to effectuate how we're doing with nonpartisan staff. So this has been a very open process, a very collaborative process, and a lot of work has been done to get to this point.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, thanks for that explanation, Representative Stevenson. I'm still concerned that, and I'm not always on the same page as the League of Minnesota Cities, but my cities are part of that association. And when they still have concerns with this bill, that gives me concern. And as well as, obviously, the business community, the Trucking Association, I mean, that's a pretty obvious safety concern that they share. And I think that this bill is just not ready for prime time. We've seen some problems in other states when it comes to public safety issues, and that really gives me the greatest concern about the recreational use of marijuana. And so with that, I guess I would just go back to the original question with partisan staff. If they've got the answer, then I'll be done.
All right. Thank you, Representative Scott. Ms. Adrian.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Scott. I don't have a great answer for you. Article 5 is where all of the expungement direction and information is. And because it's a new office and a new program, I think that there are some issues that are going to have to be worked out with the expungement board.
Representative Scott.
Well, thank you for that. And Representative Stevenson, I'm hoping that you're taking that into regard, and because if we're going to be burdening the courts in some way, then we need to let them know they were unsure in this fiscal note, of some things, and to the point that this language can be buckled up a little bit better so that they have some assurances and some knowledge of who's going to handle the expungements. I think that would be a good thing to get explicit language in the bill to as to who's going to take care of the expense and the processes of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Scott. Further discussion. Lead Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just feel like on this issue, not that I always speak for my caucus, but I want to make sure that I'm clear that I'm speaking for myself here and not for any other members on my side of the aisle. Members, the current law regarding marijuana is a prohibition model, and it's expensive, it's ineffective, and it's unfair. I support regulating it, and that means a lower cost, more effective, and more equitable structure for regulating cannabis. That being said, I do have some concerns about this bill as it is currently designed. And Representative Stevenson, first of all, I want to thank you for your work on this. I think you maybe could put a little bit more time into this bill. I don't think you've spent enough time in committee meeting with people. I was saying that sarcastically, Representative Stevenson. There are some letters we've been given, and I'll just highlight and there's concerns that are laid out in them. Can you address some of the concerns that have been addressed or ones that there are opportunities? That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is those issues that have been raised that can be addressed in a conference committee or future progress on this bill. Again, just the three primary letters I'm talking about are from Plift. The second letter we have here from someone from the University of Minnesota Student Service, and then finally from the Minnesota Industrial Hemp Association. These are all with regards to market design. If you could just highlight some of those concerns that have already been addressed and ones that could possibly be addressed in conference committee.
Representative Stevenson, and do you have the letters to, okay, great, wonderful. Representative Stevenson.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo, thanks for the question. There has been a lot of conversation about hemp. You know, the legislature took action on hemp-derived edibles last year, and it's created some very popular business opportunities here in the state of Minnesota around edibles and around THC-infused beverages. It's been a boon to, among other groups, our craft breweries and a lot of other small businesses and hemp farmers. And understandably, those groups have a lot of interest and concern about the bill as it's moving forward to make sure that they're able to continue doing what they're doing. And I believe that the bill will allow that to happen and will allow us to have the guardrails that I think that probably most people in the room think are necessary on that hemp-derived space in terms of things like ensuring these products stay out of the hands of minors, ensuring that only legal products are sold in the state of Minnesota. So we did make some big changes to the bill in terms of addressing some of the issues. The biggest one was a concern related to a federal tax provision, 280E, which basically says if any part of your business touches that illegal cannabis, you can't deduct your ordinary business expenses. So if you are a low-dose hemp-derived edible retailer or manufacturer, if we put you in a license category with adult use cannabis, a federally legal substance, there are pretty profound tax implications. So what we did to accommodate that was create an entirely different license track just for those hemp-derived products. And in doing so, address some of their other concerns. For example, there was a concern that the breweries raised about the requirement to have very segregated facilities between the stuff being used to make the low-dose products and the stuff being used to make other products. That doesn't work in the context of a brewery, for example. So we address that. We also allow substantially more vertical integration in on the hemp derived side. I do think that there's still some concern, and I think some of that is based on, frankly, misunderstandings about the bill. I hear repeated concerns about the bill requiring licensure for farming of hemp. It just does not. It does not do that. There's no change to the laws about farming or making industrial hemp. Any of the other non-consumable hemp products, topical solutions, not changed by this bill. What it changes are the products that are consumed, edibles, and only from the point that those edibles are created and sold to the public. So huge portions of the hemp industry are unchanged by this bill, but there persists information out there that it does. I'm always willing to keep listening and keep trying to work on the bill. I think that demonstrated that as we've moved it through, and I'm hopeful that we can continue to have those conversations. But I think that this is a fair approach to hemp that addresses some of the concerns that people have about guardrails while still allowing this new and frankly, exciting industry to continue to grow in Minnesota.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Stevenson. Thank you for that answer. There's a letter dated April 14th from Clifton here. I'll just highlight one sentence from it where it says, "The current version of the omnibus cannabis bill, however, will cause existing low-potency hemp businesses to shut down on July 1st, 2023." Have you addressed that concern?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo, yes, I do not believe that that is true. There's a whole section in the bill about the temporary regulations and registry that would go into effect in between when this bill goes into effect this summer and when licenses for the new licenses are available later, probably next year. So I do not believe that that statement is correct.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you. And Madam Chair and Representative Stevenson, just to be clear, we're building a market here, right? So whether we like it or not, if we're going to take a black market and create a new regulated market, we're literally going to be creating winners and losers. I don't mean to say that in a disparaging sense. It's just that when you replace a black market with a regulated market, that's what the government does. I want to make sure that I have your assurance that you're looking for a level playing field between not only cannabis, but also with hemp, that the coalition goes beyond MN is ready, and that we're looking for something that's going to be working and is effective. I just want your assurances on those three things. I'm voting no on your bill today, but I think I just want your assurances that you'll, as this process goes forward, that you're committed to those three things.
Representative Stevenson.
Well, Madam Chair, Representative Garofalo, what with your promise of voting no, how can I resist the opportunity to? No, but in all seriousness, yes, absolutely. We want a level and fair playing field. This bill endeavors to do this, endeavors to allow the businesses that are operating in this space to continue to be able to do so successfully and allow people, particularly who have been disadvantaged by the prohibition regime, to enter and prosper in the new industry that we're legalizing.
Thank you. And Madam Chair
Representative
and
Garofalo.
members, I mean, obviously, a huge problem with this is that at the federal level, marijuana is still labeled as a Schedule I drug, which is completely mindless and makes no sense whatsoever. And so, Representative Stevenson, you're tasked with the responsibility of trying to set up a regulated market that gets around within the confines of that federal side. And so that's not an easy task. So I want to wish you good luck going forward, and that you continue to engage those existing businesses that have invested real money, real property, and real time into it, and that they're not adversely impacted by this bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Garofalo. Seeing no further discussion, I will go to Representative Stevenson for final words on your bill, and thanks for all of your work. I know this has been a lot, so appreciate you being here with us today. So Representative Stevenson, closing words on your bill.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. It's unbelievable to be sitting here in the very last committee stop on House File 100. I appreciate everyone's time and contributions to the bill, and I'd ask for a yes vote today.
So I renew my motion that House File 100 as amended be placed on the general register. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. No. The motion prevails and House File 100 as amended has been placed on the general register. Thank you, Representative Stevenson.